Welcome to the Honest Mamas podcast, where we talk about the emotional and spiritual aspects of the motherhood journey. We are a team of honest mamas. Myself, Melissa, Sophie, and Claire. We are psychotherapists, moms, and friends. Join us as we get real about the topics that matter to you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 49 of the Honest Mamas podcast. This is Melissa, and today I had the pleasure of speaking with Jessica Slatus about the fourth trimester and undoing aloneness. Jessica is a licensed clinical social worker and has a private practice in Colorado. Many mamas feel alone after having a baby, and today Jessica and I shed some light on this important topic. So join me in today's conversation with Jessica Slatus. Thanks so much, Jessica, for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Melissa.
You're welcome. And I thought we could launch right in. Moms that are in their fourth trimester, that's what we're talking about today. And some of the issues that come up. And I thought we could just maybe start with, how would you define the fourth trimester?
Yeah, great. Well, I think a lot of times when we hear the term fourth trimester, that's in reference to the babies, how they're sort of adjusting to the world. But really, when I think of the fourth trimester in terms of moms, I think about how moms are adjusting to the world and how they're coming into their new role, especially as first-time moms, but also, as second or third-time moms too, because there's a lot of moving the pieces around and kind of coming into their new identity. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So I think it's really kind of like this process of birth into parenthood is what we're talking about when we talk about the fourth trimester for moms.
And why do you think that transition is so pivotal and so important?
I just think it's a massive shift. I mean, people have all sorts of experiences during pregnancy and childbirth, and some of them are difficult and some of them are totally straightforward and beautiful and what was planned. And yet I still think this massive shift into becoming a parent is huge and traumatic in the sense of like it overwhelms sort of your ability to cope because the skills that you have no longer really apply. Do you know what I mean? Like you need to develop new skills and new supports and new ways of taking care of yourself and kind of coming into this role.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of I work primarily with women in their 20s and 30s. So around this age, I finally feel or experience that a lot of women kind of find themselves and they're like, okay, this is good. I love where my life's going. I love how I feel in my body. I feel more confident than maybe I did in my early 20s or late teens. And then they're thrown into this role of like, okay, now I'm a mom. And I don't know about you, Jessica, but I felt completely turned upside down being a mom. I just no one can fully prepare you. And so, this whole shift, I feel like is so great that we're talking about it because I feel like so many people don't ever honor and really take the time to really process this through.
Right. And it's hard, right? Because you're really in this position of having to take care of your baby's every need all the time. And I think especially, I know for me, with the birth of my first child, it was kind of like a fog. Like, how do I get through this? Okay, just, feed and then you feed again and then you feed again and then you feed again. And so I think it's really important for people around the mom to be able to kind of help her settle in and kind of find the space to mark this shift because it is such a huge shift. And I like what you said about, people coming into themselves in their 20s and 30s and then they have to come into themselves again, right?
Yes.
As parents and a shift in your relationship, maybe a shift in your career, maybe. There's so much that changes.
I mean, even the shift with your partner, the shift with your family, it's not just you and your mom or your dad or your aunt or your uncle. It's now, and then the attention shifts. Then it's like, oh, how's the baby doing? I mean, I know with my family, they love me, they care about me, but when we talk or when we FaceTime, they really want to see my children. They really don't care. As long as I'm breathing and I'm well enough, they're like, okay, so where are my grandchildren?
Right. Right.
Which I love. I mean, I honestly love that part of being a mom, having my children be seen by their others and
Yes.
grandparents.
Yes.
But for the mom, I'm curious, in your experience having your first child, what that was like, what your fourth trimester was like.
It was rough. It was rough, I think. I think I was not prepared. You can take all the birth classes, you can read all the books, I'm a therapist, I study attachment, I know about all of that stuff, right? And you're really just not prepared for what it's like. So I think it was really overwhelming in all of the best ways and all of the challenging ways.
Mm-hmm.
With my first child, my son, we struggled with nursing a lot, and that was very, very difficult for me. And I think what we sort of need to do for new moms is to kind of be there with them and undo their aloneness in that experience, which doesn't mean change it or necessarily even help in the way that we think about helping, although I think it can be a wonderful experience when someone comes over and does your dishes, for example.
Right.
I think also just being with new moms, how do we do that? Because I certainly our society is not structured in that way, right? We don't have, my husband was off for 2 weeks. I don't know how much time your partner got, but our society is not structured.
No. And that might be long to some. Some people might say he got off for a day and then for financial reasons or job requirements or whatever, had to go back to work.
Right. Exactly.
But I think you bring up such a good point, Jessica, and one that, just personally, I've shared this before, but I remember after giving birth, whether it was for my first or my second, I think my second one, I had more awareness of what was happening and what I needed for sure. But the experience was the same. I really wished for, and the only way I can really describe this is like a wise elder, another woman who could come in and just hold space for me and just sit quietly and take my hand or not, and just let me talk and process and share and cry and yell and moan and whatever is in the moment, just to hold space. I think this is kind of what you're talking about, how to be with each other versus, oh, let me come over and like tell you what to do, which obviously has its time and place.
Right.
That's not all of what we need.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I remember with the birth of my son, our doula coming over and us just kind of talking through the birth story, me sharing my perspective, my husband sharing his perspective, the doula was sharing her perspective. And that just felt so accompanying, It was just so like, okay, let's just talk through what we have been through together. Because it was all three, actually really four of us together.
Yeah, that's actually, I don't know if you've heard of Pam England. She is an author. She wrote Birthing from Within. And
yes.
She also offers a birth listening course, which I took, and I met with quite a few women who, whether they were newly postpartum or they had, 19, 20-year-olds, there was something so profound about them spending time, even just an hour or 45 minutes, focused in on a very present and focused way around their birth story. It's incredible the healing that can happen when we hold space for each other in that way.
Yes.
And so you talk about undoing aloneness. Can you explain a little bit more to our listeners what that might mean?
To me, it means sort of this sense of feeling accompanied by another person, right? That what we know about trauma is that what makes people resilient through trauma is not being alone with their experience. And I think it really is traumatic becoming a parent. And that doesn't necessarily mean, and certainly people have traumatic births, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that. You could have the birth that you planned and really wanted and feel really good about. And yet in this sort of hatching into parenthood, I think is sort of a trauma to your former self. And so, I think when I think about undoing aloneness around that, I think of exactly what we're saying, people sitting with you, hearing your story, being with you in the experience, just being with you and holding space and helping you have an experience of feeling accompanied or permission to do whatever you need to do. Cry, blow dry your hair,
right?
Go to the store by yourself. Whatever you need to do.
And why do you think it's so hard in our society? Like, why do you think it's so hard just to hold space for women? You know, I know as therapists, this is what we do all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes second nature to me. And sometimes, you know, when my husband's not holding space, I sort of get so perplexed. Like, how is that so hard? Like, just sit there, breathe, pay attention, and like, that's it. But, you know, I think it's so hard for many, many, many people that obviously aren't therapists or aren't in this role of maybe active listening. Why do you think it's so challenging?
Well, I think, like we were saying before, structurally, our society is not set up for that. You know, if you have a partner who can take one day off and then they have to be working from home, that's not set up in that way. And I also think it's, you know, what we were saying before, like the emphasis becomes on the baby. How do we take care of the baby? And for me, I mean, it was like, how do I change this diaper?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
There's not a lot of room to really tune in. It's so crazy because on the one hand, you're having such a huge internal experience, right? Whether you've had a vaginal delivery or if you've had a C-section, right? Or you've gone through something huge physically, but you can't really make space for that because you're from the first moment tuning into the baby's needs, right?
You're on.
Yeah. And you're on 24 hours a day.
Yes.
For a while, right?
Yeah. And you're exhausted and you're hormonal. And some of the things like the breastfeeding pieces, if that's what you choose to do, sometimes don't go so swimmingly. Sometimes they go amazingly well, but sometimes they don't.
Right.
Tangent to processing all of this, it's almost like, as you're talking about it, I almost feel as if it's like a car driving down the highway, like your birth experience and kind of your fourth trimester experience and like what this big transition has been like is sort of left in the dust in the review mirror behind you because you're so focused on keeping this baby alive and keeping them happy and please don't cry and oh my God, how do I change a diaper and how do I get a bath and like is this cord thing supposed to fall off and you know, all the newness that comes with having a first child.
Right. And I want to say, I think, you know, I had a lot more perspective the second time around, and yet all of those things are still the same. You might not be as worried, you know how to change a diaper by then, hopefully, right? But you might not be as worried about, is this normal? Is that normal? Or the things that people, you know, new parents worry about. But you're still not sleeping. You're still feeding every couple hours. You know, you're still really in it. And you have a big kid who also really needs you.
Which is such a good point, because if we're talking about undoing aloneness and we're talking about community and we're talking about people sitting with us in those more vulnerable places, there is yet also another shift that happens when you have another child, because all of a sudden you can't sit down. Like if your children are playing nicely together, now you've got another child in the mix, which honestly, I don't know about you, but I wasn't expecting it to be so challenging in that acclimation. Like a lot of it was easier. Yes, I know how to change a diaper. My nervous system isn't on high alert as it was in my firstborn. But, you know, the sense of community and the sense of aloneness can definitely increase a little bit because you just don't have the time now that maybe you did when you had your first child, even though it didn't feel like you had time then.
Right. Right. Totally.
So how do you acclimate to that? Like what would help moms that are listening, whether it's their first child or their second child, really get some practical tools and tips to kind of help them navigate some of this fourth trimester stuff?
I think, I mean, this is speaking from my own experience, but find your tribe, whatever that means. You know, I have probably 6 or 7 moms that I text on a regular basis. And I just saw this meme somewhere on the internet that was like, behind every good woman is another woman frantically responding to her texts in the middle of the night. It was so perfect.
I love that.
I give credit to whoever wrote that. It was amazing. And so true, you know, like just to have people say, I hear you. Oh, that's so frustrating. You know, insert appropriate emoji icon. Means a lot.
It means a lot. I remember coming out of my second birth, and I've shared this story on here before, the second birth, where I remember just calling a really close friend of mine who had twins a couple months prior, and they already had a firstborn. And so I called her and I said, I know this is so normal, but I just can't stop crying. And I know it's hormonal, but I feel like my life is like falling apart. And I can see the perspective of me the second time mama knows like this is all going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But like the present time in the moment, live mama is like just barely keeping things above water.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just having her there just to listen and just to say, oh yeah, I've been there. Yep, it gets better. I know exactly what you mean. You're not crazy, even though you feel crazy. And, you know, this is hard and you will get through this. I cannot tell you how invaluable that was for me.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think that's a pretty universal phenomenon amongst moms. I hear that a lot, you know, especially with friends who have kids who are slightly older. So they're not, the kids aren't old enough that they've forgotten. And,
Right.
you know, they really know and they have some perspective and can offer that. And that, you know, and that's also undoing aloneness, right? It's just like as a parent, you would tend to your kid who doesn't have the tools to sort of, you know, get that part of their brain online to say, I know this will pass. This is just a feeling, right? Or this is just this point in time, right? Having people in our lives who can do that for us, I think is huge. And that could be partners, that could be doulas, lactation consultants, right? Friends, family, anyone, a stranger in the grocery store
Right.
could offer you something. Right?
Yes. That's such a good reminder that, you know, I'm thinking of, you know, maybe some women that don't have a huge community or maybe their partner isn't as understanding or works a lot, you know, that there are other avenues to find your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a yoga class and it could be a teacher that you really connect with. And maybe you don't have a personal dialogue, but there's something in the sharing that the yoga teacher says in that class that day that resonates with you.
Yes. Yes.
I think another tip that I think is super helpful for new moms is trying to build your community or at least staying open or aware of your community before you have your baby could be really useful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's going to, I remember, oh my gosh, you're going to laugh at me, but I remember going to, I was so pregnant and I went to a lactation class with other moms who all had babies. I was pregnant. And they were like, what are you doing here? Like, you haven't had your baby yet. I was like, I am super prepared. I try to get all the information before I go through this. This was, you know, me and my anxiety first time mom mode. But I will tell you, I did meet some amazing friends through that. And even though they kind of still chuckle, you know, it was such an amazing way to meet other moms. Also going to, you know, yoga for pregnant moms, going to different groups or things like that. There is a definite power in connecting moms in this huge transition.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. I think that that's true. And I do think that people, you know, in the same birth class, you know, who are having babies around the same time, especially in a smaller community like I'm living in right now in Boulder, is like, I think inevitably people gravitate because those are the same people that you're going to then see at, you know, mom and baby yoga or breastfeeding class or whatever, something similar like that.
Yeah, even the pediatrician.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's a really good reminder. So anything else you think that would be helpful for new moms to sort of undo their aloneness in this really kind of tricky time of the fourth trimester?
I think, you know, tell your story and listen to other people's stories. That to me, the second time around stuck out as something so huge. I was aware that every time I met up with a mom friend who I had just met, right? Because they were new mom friends. We told our birth stories, and that was a way of really getting to connect and getting to know each other on a very intimate level from the beginning. It just creates this degree of intimacy and authenticity, and is so, so important. And, you know, my daughter, my younger child is a year old now, right? And these are still the same people that I'm texting about whatever, really.
Right. And I think it's also, that's such a great point. And I also think, you bring up a good point of being in a small town, that maybe if you're listening, you're in a small town and maybe there's like 2 other moms with kids or pregnant moms. I don't know how small of a town you could live in, but that's probably could be someone's experience across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And, just to know that, maybe you will have a lasting relationship with this person, but also the reminder that maybe this person is just for now.
Mm-hmm.
And, you get what you can from this person, and maybe it's a lunch date or a walk together or, some kind of connection, but you feel in your heart it's not your person or your tribe, that's okay too. Mm-hmm. And that, you can get what you can and also keep looking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And take what you need from different people. Maybe your own parents can offer something, but they can't offer all of what you need. Maybe your partner offers something, but it's not all of what you need. So really finding the people that you can go to with the different things. It doesn't all have to, it's not all or nothing, I guess is what I want to say.
I was going to say, that's such a good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was just going to say, actually, I think that's it's a good lesson in terms of self-care for moms, right? Because you're never going to get, it's going to be rare, let's say, if you get the spa day to yourself. You're going to have to find the self-care in bits and pieces and in 5-minute increments or hour-long increments as you go. So I think that that's actually something to get good at if you can.
Yeah. And I also hear, I run locally in New York. I run with a doula friend of mine. We run birth story gatherings of women that are either really about to give birth or are very new giving birth. And 9 times out of 10, what I hear, one of the major challenges are the partners. And in this particular groups that we've done, it's been, just partner issues and feeling as if they're not getting enough from their partner. And so I think that just reminds me that, you may need a couple mom friends that understand like what it feels like to have a newborn and to feel the pressure, or to go through breastfeeding, or to go through a labor experience, or even an adoption experience, or an infertility experience, all of these pieces. I mean, if you have a partner in your life, it's wonderful. Or if you have a best friend, that's incredible. But you're absolutely right, Jessica, that one person may not fill all, tick all the boxes that you need.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. And if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
I have a website, www.jessicaslatus.com, JESSICASLATUS.
Wonderful.
That's the way to reach me. Yeah. Thanks so much, Melissa.
Great, Jessica. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me in today's conversation with Jessica. If you'd like some more support, go ahead and join us over at our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Honest Mamas Community, where these conversations of undoing aloneness and feeling more connected will continue.